Welcome, my friends, to the darkest corners. Today's tales are a haunted monastery. Please enjoy. Please like, subscribe, and if you don't like, please hit the dislike button. Also, if the hype button appears, click on that. Every click on this video helps my algorithm and lets me know what you like, what you don't like, and the channel to grow. Thank you. Have a great week. The monastery that still prays. If you're listening to this alone, turn the lights on. Because what I'm about to tell you happened to me 3 years ago. And I still wake up some nights hearing them chant. Not monks, not exactly. 1. The mountain and the silence. The monastery sat on a cliff in northern Colorado, carved into black granite, like it had grown there instead of being built. No town nearby, no power lines, no cell reception. It was called St. Severin's Abbey, founded in 1871 by a secluded order known as the Brethren of the Veil. They were reclusive even by monastic standards. No visitors, no published records, no outreach. They reportedly took a vow of perpetual silence before the throne. In 1934, the entire order vanished. Not died, vanished. The last supply delivery found the gates open, livestock starving, chapel candles still burning. No bodies were ever recovered. I didn't believe any of that. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I specialize in religious folklore and abandoned architecture. My channel does well. People love mystery wrapped in stone and candlelight. When I pitched the episode, The Vanished Monks of St. Severin's, my subscribers went crazy. I should have left it as a story. 2. The first night. The drive up the mountain was rough. By the time I reached the gate, the sun was sinking behind pine-covered ridges. Wind scraped through dead branches, making them clack like bone. The iron gate hung open. I told myself that was coincidence. The monastery loomed ahead, gray stone, narrow Gothic windows, a bell tower split by lightning sometime decades ago. Moss covered everything. The place smelled of wet earth and old wood. I started filming immediately. Day 1 at St. Severin's, I said into the camera, we're staying overnight. The word we felt wrong. There was no one else. Inside, the silence was unnatural. Not quiet. Silence. No birds, no wind once the door shut. Even my footsteps seemed absorbed by the stone. I set up camp in what used to be the refectory. Long wooden tables still stood in place, warped but intact. Plates were laid out as if someone expected dinner to resume any minute. And all that was the first thing that unsettled me. The dust was thick, undisturbed for decades, except on the plates. They were clean. 3. The Rule of the Veil. In the library, I found a leather-bound ledger titled The Rule. Most pages were in Latin, but certain phrases had been translated in the margins. The veil must not be lifted. The choir must never cease. If the silence breaks, he will hear. I assumed it was metaphor. Apocalyptic religious symbolism wasn't uncommon in isolated sects. But there was a final entry dated October 3rd, 1934. Tonight we open. That was the last written record. I remember feeling excited. This was gold for the documentary. Then the chanting started. 4. The choir. It was faint at first, low, rhythmic, coming from beneath the floor. I froze. The sound wasn't echoing through hallways. It wasn't wind. It was layered, multiple voices overlapping in a slow, droning harmony. I grabbed my camera and followed it through the corridor toward the chapel. The chapel doors were closed. The chanting was louder there. I pushed them open. Inside, the pews were empty, but the altar candles were lit. I swear to you, they were lit. The flames didn't flicker. They burned steady and tall, as if freshly placed. The chanting stopped. Instantly, the silence pressed in on my ears so hard it felt like pressure underwater. And then I heard something else. Breathing right behind me. I turned. Nothing. When I looked back at the altar, something had changed. The crucifix above it no longer depicted Christ. It was empty. The body was gone. 5. The stairwell. I should have left. Instead, I convinced myself someone else was there. Maybe squatters, maybe pranksters. Behind the altar was a narrow spiral stairwell leading down. The chanting resumed the moment I stepped onto the first stone stair. It wasn't above me anymore, it was below. And they weren't chanting in Latin. They were chanting my name, slowly, drawn out. Milton! I nearly dropped the camera. The air grew colder with each step. Not naturally cold, sharp, invasive cold that burned the lungs. The stairwell ended at a massive wooden door carved with a single symbol, a circle split down the middle by a vertical line. The veil. I didn't know that then. I pushed the door open. 6. The crypt choir. The chamber beneath the monastery was enormous, larger than the chapel above, carved entirely from black rock, and it was full of monks, dozens of them, kneeling in perfect rows, heads bowed, hands clasped. Their robes were intact, dark brown, rope belts tied at the waist, but their skin, it was gray, tight, sunken, mummified. They hadn't moved in 90 years, and yet their mouths were open and chanting. The sound wasn't coming from lungs, it was coming from somewhere deeper, like wind moving through hollow chambers inside their bodies. Their eyes snapped open in unison. Black, no whites, no pupils, just void. I stumbled backward. They didn't rise. They didn't look at me. They were staring at the far wall, at a massive stone archway carved into the rock. Inside the archway, darkness, not shadow, not absence of light, and something was breathing from within it. 7. The veil. The chanting shifted. It became urgent. The monks began striking their foreheads against the stone floor in rhythm. Crack, crack, crack. Their skin split. No blood came out, only black dust. The archway pulsed, and I saw it, a shape pressing against the darkness from the other side, humanoid in outline, too tall, limbs too long, head tilted unnaturally sideways. It pressed its face to the invisible barrier, and I saw its eyes. They were open wide and smiling. The chanting stopped. Every monk lifted their head slowly and turned toward me. They spoke in perfect unison. You are not vowed. I couldn't move. You have broken the silence. The darkness rippled. The barrier shimmered. And I understood. The monks hadn't vanished. They had been holding something back. With prayer, with silence, with constant devotion. And when they opened, they had stepped aside. 8. The breaking. The creature inside the veil began pushing harder. The archway cracked. Thin fractures spread through the stone like lightning veins. The monks resumed chanting, faster now, panicked, but their voices were weakening. Their bodies began collapsing into dust one by one. As each monk fell, the darkness pushed further through. A hand emerged. It wasn't flesh. It was layered shadow wrapped around bone. It reached through the barrier and gripped the stone floor. The temperature plummeted. I felt something press against my mind, like fingers sifting through thoughts. Images flashed, cities burning, skies torn open, people kneeling in worship, not out of devotion, out of terror. The monks had been a seal, and I was standing in the crack. 9. The choice. One monk, closest to me, didn't collapse. He turned his head slowly. His eyes weren't black. They were human, ancient, tired. He spoke alone, his voice dry as parchment. "Take the vow." I shook my head. "I don't know it." He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His hand was cold but solid. Silence. That was it. The vow was silence. Perpetual silence before the throne. The creature pushed further through the veil. Its head emerged fully. It was smiling. Too many teeth. Too symmetrical. Like something mimicking a human expression without understanding it. Silence. The monk repeated. I realized what they had done. They had given up their voices, their individuality, their identities, to keep this thing from being acknowledged, from being heard, from being known. If it was heard, it could answer. 10. The final word. The creature spoke. It whispered my name. The sound wasn't in the air. It was inside my skull. And the moment it said it, the veil shattered. Stone exploded outward. The monks screamed, actual screams this time, as their bodies dissolved completely into black ash. The creature stepped fully into the chamber. It was taller than the archway, limbs bending wrong, skin like stretched midnight. And its eyes, they were mirrors. In them, I saw myself kneeling. I saw myself opening my mouth and speaking. If I answered it, if I acknowledged it, it would be free completely. The monk, still gripping my wrist, leaned forward and whispered into my ear, "Be nothing." And then he crumbled into dust. The creature loomed over me. It extended its hand, waiting, expecting, demanding recognition. I closed my eyes, and I stopped speaking. 11. The silence that follows. I don't know how long I stood there. I don't know what happened in the chamber after I shut my mouth and refused to respond. But when I opened my eyes, the crypt was empty. No monks, no archway, no veil, just solid stone. The spiral staircase behind me and my camera on the floor. The footage, corrupted. Every file from that night was replaced with static and a single audio track. Low chanting, layered, endless. I left the monastery before dawn. I didn't speak the entire drive home, didn't speak the next day, or the day after. Because here's what I realized. The vow wasn't just for the monks, it was for anyone who knew. If you speak of it too clearly, if you name it, it listens. 12. Why I'm telling you. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you this now. Why break the silence? Because 3 weeks ago, I started hearing the chanting again. Not outside, inside. Every night at 3:34 a.m., the same date from the final entry, in the ledger. October 3rd, Trichetverti, the opening. And last night, I saw the archway, not in stone, in my bedroom wall, just for a second. A ripple in the dark, something pressing from the other side, smiling. I think the monks didn't vanish. I think they became part of the veil. And I think when I stepped into that chamber, I replaced them. One voice is not enough to hold it back. It's been growing louder, stronger. It whispers now. It says the choir is thin. It says the silence is breaking. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection, my smile looks wrong, too symmetrical, like I'm practicing it. 13. The final warning. If you ever find St. Severin's Abbey, if you climb that mountain and see the gate open, do not enter. If you hear chanting, do not follow it. If something speaks your name from the dark, do not answer. Because the veil isn't just in that monastery, it's wherever someone listens. And if enough of us respond, if enough of us speak, it won't need monks anymore. It won't need stone. It will step through wherever it is acknowledged. And when it smiles at you, when it waits for you to say something, remember what the last monk told me. Be nothing. Stay silent. Because the monastery still prays. And if it ever stops, we'll all hear the answer. If you're listening to this right now, and you hear something faint beneath my voice, low, layered, like distant chanting, don't rewind it. Don't try to isolate the audio. And whatever you do, don't say your own name out loud, because it's listening for it, and it has learned how to answer.